So again, you will have sewn right across the top here. So you can see hopefully you can kind of see that seam that's there. I'm now going to go over to the iron. I'm going to open this up like this. And I'm actually going to go ahead and press open this seam so that this actually stays open like that. I'm going to do that on both sides. Okay, as I've come back from the iron, you can see I have pressed open that seam so that it stays flat. You can see that, hopefully you can see that right there. So it's a pressed out flat, and that again is going to give you this really nice, clean seam line, which is going to be important for your garment, just looking really nice and really finished when you're done. I'm now going to lay it out here, and I'm going to try and change the camera so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just laying it out flat on this. This is actually my cutting table, but on this surface right here. And I'm going to take this. Remember I said this is the facing, and I'm actually going to lay this down. Now you want to make sure what I've got here is this is the open raw seam, and this is actually what's called the right side of the fabric, or the fabric that's going to be sitting outside and actually people see. And that I'm actually putting the facing down on the outside of the fabric. It should line up really pretty close to the neckline that is there. I'm now going to take some pins, again, my straight pins, and I'm pinning that facing to the fabric just so that I can actually sew around it. Now this is the only part that's kind of a little tricky here, is going to be the slit in the front. This is what's called a keyhole neckline, which means it's round, but it has a small slit in the front to actually, that'll open up then enough to actually fit over your head. If you made it big enough to fit over top of your head and didn't have that slit in the front, it would actually then be this big gapy neckline that's really big around your head. So I'm going to try and make sure you can see this. What you've got here in the front is this little slit right here. And that's actually does need to line up nicely with the facing. And I'll bring this over closer as soon as I'm done pinning here, but I am pinning all the way around that slit so that, again, everything sort of lines up on the facing. So I'm going to bring this over so you can kind of take a look at it. So again, here is our slit. You can sort of see that what I've done is I have this edged, right up to the very edge there and the point of the fabric. It's a little tricky to sew. I'm going to actually start and do all the way around the circle here first. And then you can actually leave your needle, your sewing needle from your sewing machine sort of staying in the fabric like that, and then lift up your presser foot and turn this around so that you can sew down here. This end down here, however, how do I, you're like, well, what do I do with that? Do I come down to a point and come back up? Actually, what I like to do is go down straight, and what I'm going to do is sort of draw the path that I would sew so that you could see it. I'm going to go down straight all the way. So I'm going to go and do my seam straight down, come right across straight here, to the bottom here, and then again come back up the other side, making sure to, as I described before, flip and turn at the corner. Now this is the one seam that I'm not going to tell you to do a 1/2 inch. I'm actually going to do this really about just the width of my presser foot, because you don't want a big bulky seam right here around the neck. First of all, it would obviously make the neck that much bigger, but also you'll see when we get to the next step that it's important to not have a ton of bulk there, because we're going to actually kind of try and trim that down and get that to fold over to be nice and neat. So again, you're going to sew down straight. You're going to leave the needle down on your sewing machine, lift your presser foot, turn the fabric. Again, leave the needle into this point here, and lift the presser foot, turn the fabric, put your presser foot back down, and you're going to do that on each of the corners. that sounds a little intimidating. Try and just practice that on a couple of pieces of fabric. The other thing you can do if you're really just not confident with that is end your fabric, cut it just the same way you, or at your seam, cut it just the same way you would, you know, turn the fabric around, put it back onto the presser foot and do it that way. It's just a little easier if you actually leave your needle plunged through the fabric at those little points to keep it all lined up, but you don't have to do it that way if you think that's intimidating. So as you can see, I have sewn around the whole circle here, and this is what I was talking about here in the front. So I've gone, hopefully you can see that, I've gone straight, I've turned, and then gone straight across the bottom here, and then back up and around again. One of the things that I also double checked is I wanted to make sure that the point here is the same place as the point here. And I actually kind of missed it on this first round here. So then I went back and re-sewed it just to make sure that they're both the same. Now, if we just took this and flipped this inside out right now, it's going to get, and this is kind of an important point, it will not lay nice and flat. See how wrinkled it's going to lay here on the inside? You have to do something that allows for this to move because it's on a circle. And this is something you do all the time. You're actually just going to go right around here. I know this is scary because you're now cutting something, but you're just going to take your scissors and you're just going to cut here right up to the line, just every, you know, inch and a half or so. Really not that much. Just so that what you're going to do is you're going to actually kind of allow this now to, when it flips over, it's not that tightness of the seam. See how nice and flat that will now lie? Because what's holding it from doing that is actually this interior portion of the seam is just not giving it enough room. So you're going to kind of slice it just a little bit to kind of ease that and allow for that fabric to move. When you go to flip the facing to the inside. Now, I want to show you something on the corners here that's really a little tricky. Because this corner now, if we went ahead and folded this in right now as it is and flipped it over here, you end up, and it's hard to see, but you end up with a lot of bulk in this corner, which is going to make it difficult to make that a nice crisp corner. So the way you do that, you're going to clip this edge here, and I'm actually going to clip it, and hopefully you can see this. I'm going to clip it straight across. So again, what I've done here is I've actually taken the corner off entirely there. And that just means that this, I have made sure that I didn't cut my seam, but that way that makes sure that now you don't have all of this sort of extra bulk that I just cut out on the inside when you go to flip that. And I'm going to do that on both sides. And then there's one other trick that I'm going to show you. This is really hard with these points. So what I'm going to do here is, you'll notice that went down straight. I'm actually going to cut it. I'm going to draw it first just so that it's easier to see. I'm actually going to cut on these two lines here. I'm going to cut directly into the corner and directly into the corner. Again, because this is sort of an inside corner, you need to give it space and room to actually be able to fold over. I'm going to do one more thing to give myself some space here. So first of all, I just want to make sure that you can see that. So you can see now how I've cut up into the corner so that there's now room and movement. I don't want this little bit of extra bulk here. So I'm just going to cut back that triangle all the way. Hopefully you can see that. Now when I go to flip this over or turn this facing to the inside, which is where it belongs, now what's going to happen here is, as you can see, I'm going to have a little bit of space and room here, but it also means that it's going to end up being pretty nice. And you end up with your keyhole here in the front. Hopefully you can see that. I'll show it to you after I press it. In the neckline of this. I'm now going to go around and I'm going to just take my iron and I'm going to press it so that all of this stays really sharp and flat and all the way around here on the inside of this. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've flipped it inside out as I showed you on the last step, and I've taken my iron and I've pressed all the way around, and you'll see I have this beautiful, nice, crisp edge now with that pressing. I want that edge to stay, so I'm actually going to go ahead and sew just right here on the inside, right on the edge. It's called edge stitching with my machine. You can also do this by hand. Again, if you take a look in the instructions on the hand sewing video, we'll show you some of this stab stitching is what it's called, which is just, again, you can just stitch around here to keep it down. But this becomes really important for the future because, of course, the first time you wear it or whatever, you want that to stay down. I also left this kind of mistaken because I wanted to show it to you. So here you go, and you're look at my corners. Hopefully you can see there's like a little bit of a fold over. It's actually easier to see on the brown side here where you can see it's much more pronounced. So when I went to fold that over, notice that I still have, it's not a very neat, flat kind of presence. That's because I haven't clipped enough out of here. This, again, is sort of still holding it. This is super tricky, so don't worry too much about it because honestly, most people will never ever notice it. But if you're feeling brave, you're going to just go in here, and I'm actually going to do a little bit more clipping. I can actually feel the fabric kind of release with my fingers in here. And all I'm doing is instead of clipping right at that same corner where I clipped last time, I'm clipping just a little bit to the side of it to kind of just give it, again, a little bit more space, a little bit more room to kind of move and give out. And now when I go over to iron it, you can see that this is now going to actually lay totally flat. Sometimes you have to clip it 2 or 3 more times. It is really easy, however, to clip too much and end up actually clipping the seam. So you have to be really, really careful with this. And again, if you don't get it quite right, or you're like, gosh, Melinda, that looks super hard and looks like a really difficult thing to do, and I'm just not that confident on it, you can just leave it be. And again, most people will never ever notice that edge there, that especially on the red side where it was even hard to even see at all, that you have that little bit. But you can see how it's got completely opened up now on the red side here. And then I'm going to go back over and I'm going to press it again. So after cutting those and then repressing them, you can see that those little folds are now, it's completely flat the whole way around. So now I'm going to go, and again, I'll draw a little bit on here to show you exactly what I mean. I'm going to actually go over to my sewing machine and I'm going to edge stitch. So I'm going to stitch really right here, like as close to this edge as I possibly can, the whole way around the neckline. Okay, so I've gone ahead and finished that edge stitching, and as you can see, or hopefully you can see, it just creates a really nice, clean edge. It'll also mean that every time you wash it, that edge stays nice and neat. Hopefully you can see I really did sew it as close as I could possibly get it. You might be able to see it a little easier on the brown side here, but it's really just, you're stitching right along that edge there to make it neat and to make that stay neat for you after wear after wear after wear. It will also to some extent help this sort of facing kind of stay on the inside here. And again, if you look at the hand sewing video, there will be instructions on how you can do what's called edge stitching, which means you'll do this by hand as well. So you can do it either way, is perfectly acceptable.